Stephen A. Smith, host of the Stephen A. Smith Show, joins me right now. It's good to see you as always. What's your take?
Good to see you. Good to see you. Not gonna lie, Chris, it was a hard listen to. I'm certainly not trying to cast any aspersions on Tucker Carlson, but just listening to him, some of the questions that he was asking you, I'm certainly not going to say that he's detached from reality, but he clearly lives in his own reality that I'd be hard-pressed to believe is inundated with an abundance of black perspectives. And that's where I took issue with what he is saying. He almost wanted to say that race doesn't exist. He came across as someone that lamented some of the things that had gone on in society, which we all do, without appreciating why that is. Clearly, he is somebody that had a problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion, programs, policies, etc. One could easily surmise that he had a problem probably with affirmative action if you asked him, with civil rights legislation. I'm assuming, in fairness to Tucker Carlson, he didn't say those things, but I'm assuming he would have an issue with it because he's saying, hey, let's be all about a meritocracy. What do you think black folks want? What do you think Hispanics folks want? Asian, etc. What do you think they want? In this nation, unfortunately, history has shown us that the white power structure that exists, that has existed, has engaged far more often than not in an inequitable system. One they cultivated, they fostered, and they pushed forward. And luckily for us, as African Americans in this country, there were an abundance of white folks in this country who were conscientious enough, who had a soul, who said there's something wrong with this picture. And in my opinion, I think I'm talking to one of them right now, one of those people, which is why I love you, which is why you're my brother. I think that I interviewed one of those people a couple of weeks ago when I had the pleasure of interviewing your brother, Andrew Cuomo, because it's not just about what someone can look at and say, this is the way it should be. How about why is it not that way? How about recognizing the fact that because of the iniquitous actions that took place in our society by a white power structure, it forced conscientious-minded people to help push forth policies that would touch us towards equality. Why didn't he talk about that? Why didn't he address that with you? Why didn't he talk about the history of America, of white America, and some of the heinous things that have transpired that led to those things? And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. We can look at stuff right now. We could say, you know what? DEI is wrong. Here's the reason why. It's not necessary. Here's the reason why, along with a plethora of other things. And guess what? In some cases, you might be right. But to do so without addressing why so many felt the need for its existence in the first place is something that I think is unfair to a vast majority of minorities in this country. You know, and that was my problem with listening to Tucker Carlson.
I get it. I don't think that Tucker, I mean, obviously he can speak for himself. I don't think that he has an issue with legislation and the changing of standards, let's say from separate but equal to integration. I don't think that that's what it is. I think it's more of a precept of what's necessary. And that whether it's his world or though he's been exposed to a lot of stuff, he doesn't see the same need for corrective action that you do or that I do. But I'll tell you.
But he wouldn't.
Right. I totally get it because you only know your own experience.
Right.
And I have a unique blessing in my life, right, which you got a different appreciation for in talking to Andrew, who says you dropped the hammer on him, and, you know, you have a problem there now that you'll have to address with him going forward. That's not something I discuss on the show. But he and I were raised to believe as a function of faith, but as basic humanity from my mother and father, that literally you and I are only different because we're treated differently. That we are absolutely the same. And now, race is a social construct. You do not cut open Stephen A. Smith and see a black gene. And you'll see regional things, you'll see African heritage. Just like when I did mine, you saw Egyptian and all this other crazy stuff in there. We're all milkshakes. But I think that it is important that when someone insists, no, race is a real thing. There's a real separation between the two of us. I think that gives you a context to start seeing differences as relevant, and that intelligence is the next thing that comes. And one of us genetically is more predisposed to intelligence. And as soon as you make that step, all of the separations are now just logical things. Well, look, Stephen A. Smith, he may be stronger, he may be faster, but when it comes to intelligence, there's a difference. These are the things that you and I have heard our whole lives that we fought against. But if you believe genetically there's a difference between the races, it starts to be easier to accept that. I started from a position of knowing it's not a matter of science. It's a measure of society and social construct.
And I agree with everything that you just said. It is a matter of social construct, at least in my eyes, and the vast majority of black people that I know in this country, because we lean more on our experiences rather than books or people who try to intellectualize stuff and approach it from a cerebral perspective to explain, you know, what has transpired and what have you. And that was the danger of what I was listening to as I was listening to Tucker Carlson. I'm not trying to cast any aspersions on him.
No,
I'm only going based off the conversation. I don't recall ever meeting him. I don't engage in castigating him in any way. That's not where I'm going. I'm just talking about in terms of what I saw in terms of the conversation that he had with you. He was dismissive of the racial construct notion that you brought to his attention, not realizing how palpable and how insulting, dare I say, that would come across to so many African Americans in this country. The fact of the matter is that covering the world of sports, think about it from this perspective. They were telling folks, they were telling the black man he couldn't play the quarterback position. You were telling the black man he couldn't be a head coach. You were telling the black man that he couldn't be a leader of men. Let's not get started with what you were telling the black women. And over the course of time, we've seen how exceptional people from all races are and can be, and we see how deficient others can be. Then you also have to take into account the kind of society that we lived in. Remember, I got left back in the 4th grade because I had a 1st grade reading level, okay? And I had undiagnosed dyslexia that I ultimately had to overcome. What was one of the challenges of overcoming it? I was in the streets all the time because my mother had to work 2 jobs, because my father wasn't handling his business appropriately. And as a result, there was a weight on the shoulders of my entire family. And so as a result, sometimes you found yourself running the streets. Sometimes you found yourself being preoccupied with things you shouldn't be preoccupied with. And as a result, that was taking up your time instead of you hitting the books and doing what you have to do. He didn't mention any of those kind of things. He didn't mention any of the potential obstacles that could lie in wait. He simply wanted to lean on race, talking to the potential intelligence or lack thereof of a race of people and what have you. And I just said to myself, wow, he really, really seems a bit detached from reality. I'm not going to be overtly or extremely rather insulted by what he said. I do appreciate the fact that he was honest and forthcoming with where he was coming from, and that he was talking to somebody like you on your level who is as conscientious as you are and willing to tackle those subjects. And I truly, truly appreciate what you did from the bottom of my heart. It's just unfortunate that he didn't see that as he was talking to you, the kind of things that I just articulated, he didn't take into consideration at all. He's in his bubble. This is how he sees it. It's not an emotional thing. It's rife with pragmatism. And to be that way is disassociating and dismissing yourself from understanding the potential realities of people who look different than you, who come from different social and economic backgrounds, who face challenges that you would never face in your life or may have never faced in your life, because I don't know Tucker Carlson, I don't know what type of challenges he's faced. It's just that I listened to that and I found myself being very disheartened at listening to the words coming out of his mouth. It was unfortunate. I'm not judging him in totality and painting him with a broad brush. I just talk about this conversation. I was not comfortable listening to him say the things that he says. I don't think he understands who he's echoing when he was saying some of the things that he was saying in the eyes of somebody who is not white. I don't think he realized that.
I mean, you know, the interesting thing about conversation is we start in the same place. Everybody's equal. And we ended in the same place, which is you should just get judged on who you are. It's this place, that space in between, that is why you have to keep the conversation going. Stephen, Thank you for your perspective. I appreciate it. Added to the context.
No problem.
Always a gift to the audience. Thank you for being here. Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.